What's up, my friends, and welcome into the PHLY Phillies Podcast. As always, we broadcast live from the Xfinity Lounge here at the PHLY Studios, and we're brought to you by our friends over at Bet365. Whatever the moment, it's never ordinary at Bet365 and TrueMark Financial Credit Union. Head on over to any one of their 24 branch locations or online at TrueMark.com/PHLY to get started today. A happy Wednesday to each and every one of you across the Delaware Valley and beyond, and welcome into another edition of the PHLY Phillies Podcast. Tyler Zulli, Ethan Hartley, you guys all hanging out in the chat, and a happy Wednesday to all of you here, whether you're watching live or you're going to watch the playback later, or you're listening on our audio-only platforms. A happy Wednesday to you, and welcome as we get closer and closer to the start of the Major League Baseball spring training, the World Baseball Classic, inevitably the Major League Baseball season as well. But we also draw closer and closer to a decision from Bo Bichette and the Phillies, or Bo Bichette and whoever he ends up signing with. And as we've kind of done over the last 2 weeks or so, our shows are pretty much centered around a wait-and-see approach. Our shows are pretty much centered around this is the big topic in Philadelphia, and we're going to continue to talk about it until it gets resolved, whether he is a Philly or he signs somewhere else. And with Bo Bichette, the conversations have gone about how much money, how many years, what position does he play, where does he fit? Does it make sense that the Red Sox are now interested? That the reports are they going to be aggressive about going after Bo Bichette, which I think that they verbally will be aggressive, and I think they'll tell you that they are. But as we talked about on Monday, I don't fear the Boston Red Sox. I think they're a contender, but I don't fear them as the number one contender as to the reason why the Phillies may not sign Bo Bichette if he signs somewhere else. But the next piece of this that we haven't talked about yet, Ken Rosenthal reported on it, Matt Gelb reported on it in The Athletic, is that the Phillies, maybe their biggest bargaining chip for a team that doesn't want to do deferrals more times than not, for a team that does not like to hand out opt-outs, maybe their biggest bargaining chip in this entire thing is the amount of years that they're willing to give up. And that's where we're going to start today's show on the PHLY Phillies Podcast. Here's what's coming up over the next hour. Is it years over AAV for Dave Dombrowski and the Philadelphia Phillies? How about this? Later reports tell you that Kyle Tucker may have a $50 million a year offer on the table from the New York Mets on what is a shorter-term deal. We're going to talk about some of the other moves that were made around baseball, including the Nolan Arenado trade, and then we'll wrap up today's episode with our Wednesday edition of Remember Me. Welcome into the PHLY Phillies Podcast. Tyler Zulli, Ethan Hartley, you guys all hanging out in the chat. Thank you so much for being a part of today's show. And as I said right in the open there, the biggest tool that the Phillies may have in their arsenal to woo Bo Bichette into signing is the amount of years in which they're willing to offer a particular player. We've seen it over the course of the last couple of off seasons, the last couple of free agencies, the Phillies being willing to give out more years in order to keep AAV down. And on his Twitter account, and as part of his article, Matt Gelb wrote this, quote, "When the Phillies want a star player in a competitive market, they typically wield years as their separator. It's one reason why rival clubs are beginning to see them as Bo Bichette's most serious suitor." And it's something that we've talked about all offseason. The Phillies and Dave Dombrowski over the last couple of years like to stretch out years to keep AAV down comparably. Now, this offseason, I did say this might be an offseason in 2026 or heading into 2026 where they flip that role, especially for their internal returnees. Their Kyle Schwarber re-sign, a JT Realmuto re-sign. While it felt like outside of the realm of possibility, a potential Ranger Suarez re-sign, it felt like those two guys, JT and Schwarber specifically, because of their relative age, because of what their markets might look like, the Phillies may be interested in flipping that role and going for higher AAVs and less years, kind of like they did with the Zach Wheeler extension, where they made it a 3-year extension, but made him one of the highest paid players in baseball per season on an AAV basis. I think he's making $42.5 million. That felt like a trend that might make sense for the Phillies heading into this offseason. Now, Kyle Schwarber ended up getting 5 years, which is kind of right on the nose of what we predicted, and $150 million, which the $30 million AAV was actually a little bit less than I thought it was going to be. My thought was 4 to get to $32.5 million per season. They ended up going 5 for $130. But over the last few seasons, external free agents have often gotten more years from the Phillies, which, especially for veteran, older players, is something that they look for. Whether it be because of having some concrete beneficiary, like in terms of being stabilized in a city, meaning off the field stuff, or a concrete contract knowing that they're going to be paid out over a larger stretch of years. Sometimes veterans turn to that as a choice that they would prefer. It's security in both baseball and in life. And so when you start to get veterans on your team like the Phillies have constructed, sometime being able to wield those years, as Matt Gelb pointed out, is a step in the right direction for you. So I went back and pinpointed a couple of different free agencies that free agent players that the Phillies have signed over the last couple of years. But one free agent year in specific stood out. It was the 2019 offseason. Of course, the year the Phillies signed Bryce Harper to a 13-year, $330 million deal. Now, for Bryce Harper, in 2019, the $25.4 million annual AAV that he received in that contract made him, by AAV, the 13th highest paid player in baseball. Pretty respectable for a guy who has won multiple MVPs and has been a franchise face for the better part of his entire career. But over that same offseason, two other players signed to pretty extensive contracts. One was a guy that the Phillies suited or were suitors for in Manny Machado. The other one was Patrick Corbin, a guy that the Phillies brought in, and I think a lot of Phillies fans are glad that they didn't. Manny Machado, meanwhile, got a 10-year deal for $300 million. Of course, pretty round numbers there, an annual AAV of $30 million per season. Patrick Corbin, meanwhile, got 6 for $140 with the Nationals, which is good for $23.3 million per season. So the year that these three guys signed, Manny Machado was the 7th highest paid player in terms of AAV in baseball. Patrick Corbin was 22nd. So Bryce Harper got less money AAV than Manny Machado, who he was in direct competition with for signing these big deals, and was only 9 slots ahead of Patrick Corbin, who turned in one of the worst performance per contract that we've seen in a really long time. One of the bad contracts around baseball. It got worse and worse as the seasons went on. Bryce Harper was only 9 slots ahead of him in terms of AAV. Now, when you think about 2026, Bryce Harper's $25.4 million AAV ranks him as the 35th highest paid player per AAV in baseball. Manny Machado is 17th. That number is now double what Machado is making. Not to say that Machado is not a stellar player in his own right, because he certainly is and is deserving of $30 million per season. But the point being is the Phillies wield years in order to keep AAV down, knowing that every time a big-time player signs an extension, AAVs go up and their player's value in AAV goes down. Bryce Harper fell back 22 spots from 2019 to present day. Manny Machado, meanwhile, has only gone back 10 spots. You can look no further than 2023 as well to get a clearer picture. In 23, the Phillies signed Trey Turner to an 11-year, $300 million deal, which was $27.2 million AAV. That's less than a similar contract signed by a shortstop with the Minnesota Twins, Carlos Correa. He got less years, but more AAV at $33.3 million. Turner is now the 25th highest paid AAV per season. Correa is 14th. So Machado is 13th, or 17th, excuse me. Correa is 14th. Meanwhile, Harper is 35th, and Trey Turner is 25th. This is not a carte blanche absolution of every move that the Phillies have made. Believe me, they have misallocated their funds at certain places. Think Nick Castellanos and think Taijuan Walker. But it is to say that the Phillies have historical and empirical proof over the last few off seasons of being willing to give out more years to keep the AAV down just by spreading it out over more seasons. They've effectively said, listen, we're willing to recognize that maybe the final 2 or 3 years of your contract are not the player that you were when we signed you. The return on investment in years 6, 7, and 8, or in Turner's case, 8, 9, and 10, or in Harper's case, 11, 12, and 13, are not why we signed you. The return on investment in years 1 through 5 or 1 through 7, that's the reason that we signed you to this multi-year, double-digit in many instances, years salary contracts in a free agency. The Phillies have shown you that they're willing to hand out more years to keep the money per season down. They want to make sure that their title run, their title window, keeps open by being able to be a little bit more financially flexible. Now, that does not mean that the Phillies are not going to have to pay a boatload of money for Bo Bichette if they sign him. We've talked about this plenty. They're basically on a $2 to $1 tax to salary ratio. So if you pay Bo Bichette $25 million a season, at least over the next few years until you figure out how your contracts are constructed, $25 million next season is going to roughly cost you $50 million. And there's no getting around that. That's just how these tax brackets work, and that's just how these aprons, if you will, to use an NBA term, work. So you're going to have to spend a ton of money in order to get Bo Bichette. That will remain true no matter what other moves you facilitate. A trade of Alec Boehm, not re-signing JT Realmuto, an unexpected trade that we did not see that would alleviate some of your arbitration-eligible money players, like a Bryson Stott or a Brandon Marsh, for example. There is no question about it. The amount of money that the Phillies are going to have to spend to acquire Bo Bichette, at least this year, is going to be astronomical when it comes to salary plus taxation. But this is where the Phillies tell you they're willing to make these type of sacrifices by giving out more years to keep the AAV down. And so while we tell you that not every move that Dave Dombrowski has made has been a home run, $38 million this season are going to Nick Castellanos and Taijuan Walker, no matter what you end up doing with them, unless you're able to facilitate a trade and get some of these teams to take some of that money back. That's their formula for success. That's their formula for wooing free agents, is they wield, I'm going to use the phrase that Matt Gelb used, wield years in order to become real suitors. And that is why I know that despite the fact that the Phillies know the money that they're facing, they're still going to be very much in play for Bo Bichette, and that's why this thing has real tangibility to it. All right, let's welcome in our second member of today's program, our producer, our co-host, our buddy Ethan Hartley to the show. This is a pretty straightforward conversation. The Phillies have, for years now, said, we'll give you years, we'll give you the guaranteed money, but it's spread out over 8 years as opposed to 6. It's spread out over 13 years as opposed to 10. With that in mind, does your belief that the Phillies can land Bo Bichette go up at all?
It's so hard.
You're skeptical.
Because on one hand, I am very much like anti super notoriously long contracts. Like the Trey Turner one just felt so gross to me for being so long at that point in time, or at the point in time in his career, and having so many questions onward from that point. Like, can this guy still be a shortstop at age 36 and so on?
I think you could ask the question, can he be a shortstop this season?
Yeah, and again, like, you know, the like stuff like that just like kind of just slowly creeps up over and over and over again, and so it's always the same thing, and I always have to think about Bo Bichette's super low lows, where, you know, he had a stretch where he was frequently injured. He had stretches where he really bad stretches, and I mean like almost like season long stretches where he just, you know, can't make contact to the ball. And so that is what really worries me, where giving out almost like gifted years just to please you now is more like it's so hard for me to buy into that. I mean, I understand I'm not in the position to have to play that card, because I mean, I get it. Like it is quite an advantage for players to know they're going to get paid not only more lump sum of money at a certain rate, but in years where they still might not produce nearly as much. And so even if they're playing bad, like, you know, that is on its own one hand, but financially it's no question at all.
And I think that's the unique setup of baseball, is the minute you sign pen to paper, that contract is guaranteed. And so while you may not get $30 million a year, spread out over your paychecks, and it's $25 million a year instead, you know that if I play really poorly, and let's assume I give 5 out of 8 really good years, year 6 is okay, year 7's like my body's given up on me, I can't play the field anymore. I'm maybe just a DH at this point, but they don't have a spot for me at DH. In your back pocket, like, hey man, I just produced one of my worst baseball seasons ever, and I'm still about to get $25 million, right? So I think that there is, in baseball's argument, it becomes very enticing on both sides to say, hey, I'm going to get $30 additional million over a 8-year period. It's just going to come, $3.5 million at a time. You know what I mean? As opposed to saying, hey, 10 for 300 or 13 for 330. Now, if you're Juan Soto, for example, you might get a second large contract. But guys that sign multi-year extensions or multi-year contracts at 27, 28, 29, the likelihood is that's probably your last contract, your last sizable large contract. Bryce Harper signed a 13-year deal with the expectation that he is going to play the remainder of his career in Philadelphia. Allows you to set up your family, allows you to set up your life outside of baseball. You're guaranteed till the age of, 40 or whatever it was that Bryce Harper will be when he signs. Mm-hmm. I think baseball offers that unique opportunity for players because the minute that you sign the contract, the money's guaranteed. So it may not get there right away, but if you're fiscally responsible, you're going to get an additional $30 million. It's just going to be in smaller individual payouts, but it's a larger grand total payout.
Yeah, and I think that's what makes the deferral so interesting in baseball, and that I think I even talked about this on Monday. Just what is the understanding of why more players don't do that because of what it can set up for you financially later down the line. I mean, I don't know. I guess that's more of an economical question, and based on what
sure.
What is that?
That becomes well above my pay grade.
Yeah, what is that $3 million worth now versus in 10 years in retrospect? But no, it is very interesting, and I've always questioned why the Phillies don't participate in that more. I guess is it like too complicated to make a hassle out of and stuff like that. But on the other hand, you look at the Dodgers and they're running away with it, and
sure.
both deferrals and in rings at the current point in time. So, yeah, I guess to answer your original question, I guess I wouldn't mind like 6 years even. Mm-hmm. I think that would take him to 34. But I see some comments going to 8 years, and that's where I kind of really start to sweat.
I've seen reports of 8. It's been weird. The AAV for everything that we just talked about has kind of been pretty consistently in the $25 to $30 million a year range, but the years have been wildly fluctuating. Mm-hmm. About you see this writer or this beat or this, and they all put a list together, and it's like it could be 5 for 160, it could be 8 for 250. You know what I mean? Like the years have been the weird part for this Bo Bichette case, and I think that could give the Phillies a leg up in this conversation. Now, again, it could come back to bite you in year 6, 7, 8. Like if his bat speed slows down and his bat to ball rates get worse, because we know what he's not. We know he's not a good defender. We know he's not a particularly strong base runner. He is being signed specifically because he adds an extra layer, an extra element to your lineup. No matter where he signs, he's not a good defender and he's not a good base runner. So you're bringing him in to be a good bat, and you hope to mitigate the other problems. If that slows itself down when he gets to be 35 or 36, then sure, you're going to be like, wow, this is a $28 million per year contract for a guy who can't play anymore. But I think that plays itself into the Phillies' favor when you say, if somebody offers him a 5-year deal and the Phillies are willing to go 7, that means something to players, I think.
100%. And especially at the age, I mean, arbitration in a lot of cases really eats into like the prime years
sure.
of when you're able to get a contract. You think about the NBA, you're 23 when your rookie deal ends, and then you're up for an extension, and you could earn,
Supermax money's crazy.
Yeah. Well, 2, 3, 4 contracts after that is that you
right.
still you are still able to go back to the negotiating table with a team and reformulate
sure.
some sort of contract. Whereas in baseball, I think, I can respect Bryce Harper a lot for thinking in that manner that, I have to think about this long term based on the age that, I am entering free agency, and I don't really want to deal with this again, as I would imagine what the top of his thought is. So he picked the best suitor for that. And, it is peace of mind for everybody else that,
sure.
This is a done deal. But yeah, it is really interesting how uniquely formulated baseball is in terms of how it allocates money and allocates contracts to its players.
So let me know in the chat, what do you think is, how many years would you go in terms of this Bo Bichette contract? I think, as Provolone John points out, if it's an 8-year contract, he'll be 35 at the end of it. Now, I don't know what his bat speed looks like at 35, but I don't like to play the just blanket that's future Tyler's problem, because that comes back to bite you at some point.
Oh, yeah.
But I do think we're talking about 8 years from now. That is a long enough time period away, especially in professional sports, right? You can blink and 8 years goes by, and all of a sudden, in 8 years, I'm going to be 40. That feels a whole heck of a lot different than being 32. But in baseball sense, 8 years could be a rise, a fall, and a rise again in terms of an organization. So for him, if years 6 and 7 and 8 maybe don't translate as well as you hope, it's not like he's going to be 40 when the contract is up. It's not like 35. He could still be a really good hitter at 35. Maybe not the type of guy that he is now, but if you're looking on the negative side of things, the positive spin would be, we've seen quite a few 35-year-olds still be solid hitters in baseball. Maybe not the contributor that they are at 28, but still very serviceable, good players. And if you're thinking about, hey, it's $27 million a season, we gave you the numbers. Bryce Harper's fallen 22 spots already. In 7 years, Bo Bichette might fall 20 spots, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Manny Machado fell, 10 spots, right? Patrick Corbin, when he was up, fell a boatload of spots as well. And that was a bad contract. Mm-hmm. And so, as the years progress, especially in baseball, where we're going to eventually see $1 billion contract, one day. It might be deferred for, 8 generations.
100 years.
But we're going to see it one day. And I say that kind of facetiously, of course. In baseball, the minute that you put the pen to the paper, you're getting the money anyway. So I think that, if you get 5 good years out of an 8-year deal, that's a pretty good return on investment. We're going to complain about it in 2031. That's just the nature of being a fan. Just like we complained about Nick Castellanos' contract. But if Bichette produces the way that he has 3 of the last 4 seasons for 5 straight years, that to me is a pretty objective win.
I put a poll in chat, and through the first 8 votes, 100% would give 6 or more years to Bo.
Yeah, I think, I think would I love for it to be a 5-year deal with the same AAV? Sure, of course I would. Because I think I feel better in predicting his age 33 season than I do his age 35 season. But you're not going to get him for a 5-year deal. At least I don't think. And I think that's the tool that they're going to utilize.
Yeah.
All right, let's pause on the other side. We're going to get into the Kyle Tucker conversation because, as I said on Monday, he's the wrinkle. He's the problem that I fear with the Bo Bichette contract. And a team not named the Toronto Blue Jays are reportedly offering him $50 million a season. We'll talk about that. We'll talk about the Nolan Arenado trade, and we'll wrap things up with a little bit of Remember Me today. It's the PHLY Phillies Podcast. We broadcast live from the Xfinity Lounge. We'll be right back after this. New year, new you, right? That's what they always say. And if you're thinking about that with your finances and you've been waiting to take an advantage of a great offer to boost your savings, that's where our friends at TrueMark Financial come into play. They are offering a limited 5-month certificate at 4.25% APY. And with a minimum deposit of just $500, it's super easy to get started. So whether you're thinking about a special goal, whether that's a vacation, or, maybe popping that question to a special somebody, or you're just thinking about your emergency fund or want smart ways to make sure that your money works just a little bit harder, this certificate is a great option. You can open your certificate today at TrueMark.com or by visiting any one of their 24 branch locations. Annual percentage yield is accurate as of 12/15/25 and is subject to change. Certificate requires a minimum deposit of $500. Federally insured by the NCUA. Visit TrueMark.com for full details. Again, visit TrueMark.com for full details today. Whatever the moment, it's never ordinary with our friends over at Bet365. You find out why 90 million users worldwide have teamed up with Bet365 because they are the live in-game betting pioneers. You can get in on constantly changing lines, and you can live stream 780,000 different events each and every year across 78 different sporting platforms. They offer awesome early payout across the NHL. If your team goes up by 3 goals at any point, your bet is going to be marked as a winner. And how about this? Right now, new users who sign up with Bet365, use that promo code on the bottom of the screen there, PHLY365, deposit $10, place a bet for just $5, and you'll get $200 back in bonus bets, whether your bet wins or loses. You can use that bonus bet money on spreads, totals, player props, futures, and a heck of a lot more. You find out why it's never ordinary with our friends over at Bet365. You must be 21 and physically located in PA. If you or someone you know has a gambling problem and wants help, please call 1-800-GAMBLER. Back to the PHLY Phillies podcast. Tyler Zulli, Ethan Hartley, you guys hanging out in the chat. Thanks so much for being a part of today's show. And as always, thank you for being here. We love you and we appreciate you. What does this do? Look at this. What is this doing?
It's cursed. The ghost of this building doesn't want to hear you talk.
I mean, I don't want to hear me talk either. But for those of you watching or listening on audio platforms, I don't even know if you can hear me anymore. My microphone just decided it was done. 25 minutes was enough.
Yeah.
Ethan, I got a question for you. What's the best vacation you've ever taken? I know it's off the cuff, but curious your thoughts. Best trip, vacation, doesn't really matter. What stands out to you?
That's really hard. And it makes me feel sad that I don't have an answer right off the cuff.
That's all right if you don't. How would you feel about traveling to the moon and staying on the moon in a hotel?
Maybe not at this current juncture. If there was more developed, then like sure.
Apparently, there is a company with wealthy backing that says you can put a deposit down of up to $1 million to secure a spot in the first lunar hotel. Apparently, construction is set to begin in 2029. The hotel will open in 2032. A deposit of up to $1 million is required, and a nightly fee on the moon is $416,000. So obviously, this is for the ultra wealthy weirdos of the world. But I have a bigger question than like, would you or would you not go to the moon? There's no way they're going to complete construction of a lunar hotel in the next 6 years and not be entirely detrimental to like life as we know it. Do they not know that like the moon controls the tides and all of this? Like this would be bad forever. There's no way you could do construction on the moon without impacting tidal functions.
How long does it even take to get to the moon?
Well, and that's my other question. You have to get your own transportation to the moon?
Well, that, and I'm just thinking even construction-wise, like how do you make this
damn,
make
we
sense?
got the wrong drill bit. We got to go back to Earth to go get the right parts.
Yeah, it's imploding.
There's no way this is, do you know, remember the scene in Jurassic Park where Ian Malcolm, and I'm going to paraphrase, but he says something like, we were so focused on if we could, we never stopped to think if we should. Mm-hmm. That's this.
Yep.
Like, you should not be doing this. I saw this on Twitter today. Apparently, it's been around for, like, the stories are starting to break today. There's no way this is real.
Yeah, and what would you even do that would possibly make it worth that kind of money to just stay for a night? Like,
well, right, that's the
thing. Am I
thing.
swimming in a pool on the moon for $400,000?
Because clearly, obviously, they're going to have to put a dome, right?
Yeah.
Like, you can't, there's no oxygen. You're not going to be able to breathe. So you got to have a dome. Mm-hmm. And you got to get proper space travel gears. You got to be in full, rocket, astronaut gear to get there. Mm-hmm. And then, like you said, what are you going to do? Like, you're just at a really nice regular hotel, but you're on the moon. I don't buy it.
Yeah. And as Ray Schumacher says, which thank you so much for looking up, it takes 3 days to get from the Earth to the moon. Does
it really?
I guess so, yeah.
So, like, how are you going to, do you provide your own, like I'm asking, like you got to buy your own rocket?
Do you provide?
You know what I mean? Is there
transportation?
Is there a budget rocket ship like Spirit for the moon?
I don't know
like,
if at that point in time it's worth it. The budget option. Oh
my gosh. This sounds like a disaster waiting to happen. All right, let's get back to some more tangible things. Kyle Tucker, his market's been kind of weird because everybody wants Kyle Tucker. Like I think you would want him on your baseball team, and a lot of teams are willing to shell out some really specific, some really sizable money for Kyle Tucker. But I don't think that Kyle Tucker and his camp are getting the years that they were initially hoping for. And the one report now says that the New York Mets, who have long been in on the Kyle Tucker sweepstakes, are offering a short-term deal. No years were attached. I would venture a guess to say it's probably 3 or 4 years at $50 million per season AAV. And as I said on Monday, a Kyle Tucker deal not in Toronto feels really detrimental to the Bo Bichette move here, especially if a Kyle Tucker deal gets done quickly. Now, I got an email from, it was a notification from MLB Morning Lineup, and it's basically like a morning debrief, kind of like what we get here on our daily newsletter from Rich Hoffman, which you should subscribe to. It's free, but I get it from MLB as well. And the headline is a Kyle Tucker decision imminent? That is worrisome to me when it comes to the Bo Bichette type of conversation. But it is strange that the Kyle Tucker news has not really gotten really off the ground in terms of how many years, the long-term years that he is looking for. The Mets obviously make sense. The Blue Jays have been in play. The Dodgers are always lurking around, especially with their deferrals like we talked about. You and I, Ethan, on Monday talked about power rankings and the Mets being, kind of in a weird spot. If they sign Kyle Tucker, it puts them right back into the thick of these conversations. No question about it. But I do fear that the Kyle Tucker short years, high AAV deal would become detrimental to the Phillies in their chances of Bo Bichette.
100%, because, then Toronto would be more inclined to allocate that same money to give just right back to the guy who has already been there. They went to the World Series with, and zero questions asked. And I
know from a defensive structure standpoint, they have made their decision on who they want playing where. Like Ernie Clement's going to get every day at bats now. They love Andres Gimenez's defense, even if he's not necessarily a great offensive player. That defense plays everywhere. I know that there's fleeting positional chances for Bo Bichette in Toronto, but it doesn't necessarily mean close the book on him there, especially if Tucker signs elsewhere. $50 million a season is not something to scoff at, but I wonder how long Kyle Tucker's group is going to hold out for, knowing that they probably want, I'd guess, an 8-year deal, 7 or 8 year deal.
He's not super old. You could probably even argue.
You maybe even swing 10.
Yeah, that's what my initial thought was. I'm just going to look up his age, but I don't believe he...
I would say he's 27 or 28.
He's 28.
28.
Yeah. You can go 10, go to 38 years.
Now, when you see short-term deal, no years have been provided, but when you see short-term deal, what does that look like to you?
I hear 3.
3 was kind of my first guess as well. 3 for 150 type of contract where they're willing to just say, hey, we'll balloon the AAV, which is kind of counterintuitive to what we were talking about earlier with Dave Dombrowski. But this is something that I do in MLB The Show when my team is not good and I'm looking to bring in my first-time big free agent. Or I go, hey, I got $1 billion because I haven't spent, because all my guys are on 23-year-old rookie deals. I'll give you $20 million a season for 3 years. Your market value is 9. You know what I mean? That's something you do in a video game. But the Mets are doing kind of the opposite of what the Phillies are looking to do, which is spend big-time money per year, but the guaranteed going rate might only be $150 or $200 million. I say only, but only in a Kyle Tucker retrospect. We can use the word only.
Yeah, 100%. And it's so interesting that this is the model that the Mets have chose to kind of run with. And I guess maybe it's just because Steve Cohen has just infinite amount of money to spend. But I think just and I've talked about it before. I think just in retrospect of it all, just being the biggest spender versus finding value here and there and providing growth. I think it's just very interesting. And it makes perfect sense why the Mets are the team to come out at this point and say, here, we'll just write you blank check, whatever you want.
Sure. I mean, Steve Cohen's got it. No question.
Mm-hmm.
But it's been a weird offseason. And listen, I think when you see, this is not going to be a pot shot at anybody in particular. I think it's just a reality of how this works. There are certain writers who have certain ties to certain clients, or certain agents, I should say. And I think what ends up happening sometimes is if you have a tie to an agent who feeds you, a little tidbit of information here and there to get the scoop, you end up, your reporting sometimes feels a little bit more favorable to that player. Inversely, if you don't have a tie to that client, sometimes your reporting gets a little bit on the negative side. I will say, I've seen reports that go, why would the Mets not spend money all offseason in terms of bringing back Alonso, bringing back Diaz, all of this, spending on pitching, and then turn around and give $50 million a year to Kyle Tucker? I get the point. I get the sentiment. But I also think if you have an ability to sign Kyle Tucker when maybe you didn't think you had that ability when the offseason began, wouldn't you take the chance at it? Wouldn't you take an opportunity and go, hey, like $50 million a year is a lot of freaking money, but it's only for 3 seasons. And we know he's going to be, assuming he doesn't get hurt, like we expect him to be productive.
Right. It's the same sentiment with all the Japanese players that have been coming over and they're they get to the end of their posting period and then, suddenly it's like the White Sox,
Sure.
Like, oh, sure.
Getting Murakami for what they did was a good deal, I think.
Yeah. And they were far from the top of the list in terms of original suitors that
right.
made sense for Murakami to sign. But, sometimes that kind of stuff just falls in your lap. And I think at this point in time, I'm sure the Mets have, more insider information about where Kyle Tucker stands in terms of market interest. And, they feel that they can make a shot at it. So, why not?
And then so the other point of this is, like, we were discussing the comfortability of a place, and of a team. The inverse comes about when it is short. I think that middle ground is the no man's land. That 4 to 5 year range feels like kind of like what Bregman signed, but Bregman obviously a little bit older. When you're in your 26, 27, 28, you either go short-term high AAV because you're going to get another big-time contract. And if Tucker signs 3 for $150, he'll only be, 31 when he signs his next deal? He'll get another big-time deal. Or you sign 10 for $400, right? And you give up some of the AAV for the guaranteed money. It's an argument that, like, the Phillies can utilize for Bo Bichette. Hey, we'll give you more years, less AAV, more money total. But the Mets can also use it on the flip side and say, we'll give you less years, but man, $50 million a season is enticing. And then you can hit free agency in 2029 at 31 years old and still go get yourself another 6-year contract. And a 6-year contract for $400 million paired with your 3 for $150, you just signed for 9 for $550. That seems pretty good to me. So I think teams can utilize this in both ways, much like wielding years for Bichette makes sense for the Phillies. Throwing out big-time cash up front for Tucker for the Mets also makes sense.
Right. It's a win-win. You re-enter the market. And,
right.
And again, as we touched on the economics of things.
I think the worst type of contract for a big-time free agent in their mid to late 20s to sign is a 5-year deal.
Yeah.
Because then you've kind of put yourself at a weird spot where, hey, maybe you're going to be 33 when the contract's up.
Yeah.
Maybe you have a bad year heading into free agency. Your market dries up a little bit.
Yeah, you're less likely to re-enter the market with kind of the same or higher value
right.
than you had beforehand. Whereas like
Bregman signing 5 made sense. He's going to be 37 when the contract's up.
Yeah, and his choosing to, well, he was given the opt-out in his contract with Boston to be able to do so. But yeah, on the flip side, you look at Juan Soto where, turned down $500 million at 21 or
right.
21, 22 years old. But he bet on himself and he knew I still have time to show what I can be season over season. And he proved to have a consistent track record and then gets a record-setting deal.
Yeah. I said, I'm Juan Soto. Watch this type of thing,
Yeah.
and won. And sometimes listen, if you bet on yourself and blow your Achilles out, for example, that's the unfortunate nature of the sports business. But you bet on yourself and you continue to be the, top 10 type of player that Juan Soto's been, you're going to make some big money. And he did. He got $700+ million over that contract with the Mets. So I think really the only bad place to be if you're like 27, 28 and a free agent is signing a 5-year deal. You sign 3 for big time money. Sure. Sign 8 for security. Yep. Makes sense too. 4-year deal at that middle price. That would be the one that doesn't work. All right, let's take a break. On the other side, we'll talk a little bit about the Nolan Arenado trade, what it means for the kind of tie-in between he and Alec Boehm, and then we'll finish things up with our Wednesday Remember Me edition, our trivia edition of this PHLY Phillies podcast. We broadcast live from the Xfinity Lounge, and we'll be right back after this. All right, so you found your special someone, that person that you want to spend the rest of your life with. Now you know what the next question is. Well, before you even pop that question, you're going to have a million different questions about the perfect ring for your partner. That's where our friends at Bucci Jewelry and Design come into play, because you don't know, or maybe you don't know what the 5 C's are, how much money you're able to spend, what your budget is going to get you. It is a stressful experience. I've been there. That's why working with our friends Joe and Michelle at Bucci Jewelry and Design has been a game changer. They make the process seamless. They make you feel like family. You're not just a customer to them. You are one of one. They actually listen to you. They help you figure out what your partner is going to love, and then their team designs something completely custom right there in-house. There's no pressure. There's no pushy sales vibes. It's just good people who love what they do and do what they love. So next time you need that perfect piece, go see Joe and Michelle at Bucci's Jewelry and Design. 30 plus years in the game, voted Philly's #1 jeweler year after year. Over 1,000 5-star reviews. You can check them out at BucciJewelers.com and tell them that we here at PHLY sent you. All right, with the winter months in full swing, you know that means we have an incredible slate of sports across a bunch of different platforms, whether it be pro football playoffs about to start, college football playoff in full swing, and how about this, pro hockey, pro hoops, and college hoops, all right there for your watching enjoyment. And if you call yourself a sports fan, you have to get Xfinity. There's no lagging, no buffering, no switching between apps. It's just the best sporting destination where you can find all of the best games and your favorite teams all in one place. It's the perfect fan flex where you get all of that action right there in your living room. And with crystal clear optics, enhanced sound with 4K, it's going to feel like you're at the arena or at the stadium anyway, and you don't have to worry about battling traffic and paying for tickets. And sometimes you can have up to 4 games going at once with the quad box, because why not? You can. And on top of that, you get real-time notifications and live stats right there on your TV. So next game day, make sure that big fan in your life isn't a big fail. Tell them to learn more at Xfinity.com. Xfinity, imagine that. All right, welcome back to the PHLY Phillies Podcast. Tyler Zulli and Ethan Hartley hanging out with you guys on a Wednesday afternoon here in Philadelphia. One of the big trade, I shouldn't say it was a big trade, because like it was 1-for-1. There was a big time salary, moving in the trade, but nominally, Nolan Arenado gets traded yesterday to the Arizona Diamondbacks from the St. Louis Cardinals. They acquire just 1 prospect, and the Cardinals, I believe, are paying out a majority of the contract. Ethan, I think it's 31 of the final $41 million or something along those lines.
Sounds about right.
That they're paying. Now, I have long argued on this show that I have no interest in Nolan Arenado as a member of the Phillies. 4 years ago, he was the best third baseman in baseball. You could not have signed me up any faster for a Nolan Arenado acquisition. But at the time, the Cardinals were still trying to compete. There was no way that they were going to move Arenado at that time. At this point, I argued it last year. He wasn't particularly good in 2025. I argue it in 26. All of his metrics are heading in the wrong direction. There was some money still left. Now, obviously, the Cardinals ate a bulk of it in order to make the trade happen. But I will say this, the caveat to everything I just said. For $5 million a season, I think that it's a good move for the Diamondbacks to make. They're not paying him a whole ton of money. You get a known quantity defensively at third base. What does his production offensively look like? I don't really know. But basically what you've done over the last 12 months is go from a power-hitting butcher defender at third base in Eugenio Suarez to a one-time, perhaps the best defensive player in all of baseball at third base in Nolan Arenado. Maybe he's taken a step back defensively over the last couple of seasons, but a step back goes from this guy's legitimately the best defender in the game to he's still pretty darn good defensively. I don't necessarily know what his offensive productivity is going to look like in Arizona over the next 2 seasons, but for what they gave up and what they're going to pay him for the next 2 years, this is not a bad move for Arizona. I think they're taking a shot at acquiring somebody who they feel can be a known quantity, at least on one side of the ball. Because what did Arizona do really well over the last 2 years? Score runs. What did Arizona struggle with over the last 2 years? Prevent runs. What does Nolan Arenado do still at a ridiculously high clip? Prevent runs. Now, that's still going to mean that their pitching has to be better than it was a season ago. And really, for the last 2 seasons, Arizona's pitching has been pretty problematic. There's been a slew of injuries. The guys that they've signed, like Eduardo Rodriguez, are not nearly as good as they had hoped. Jordan Montgomery, the same thing. They hope to get Corbin Burns back at some point this year, getting Martinez back at the back end of their bullpen. Puck was injured all of last year. They had a slew of injuries that were, nothing you could do about it. If they didn't have Shelby Miller in the back end of their bullpen before they traded him, their bullpen would have been a disaster. But I think adding a known quantity to the thing that you don't do well, which is prevent runs, for $5 million a season, that makes some sense. While I've been pretty staunchly anti-Nolan Arenado as a Philly, I think for the Diamondbacks specifically, not a bad move.
Yeah, I think, there's still some name value and maybe, some sort of minor mechanical changes might, help bring back a lot of contact and power into his swing and, can be a little bit of a better hitter than he was beforehand. I understand age is probably a large hit to that, but yeah, for $5 million for a player like that to get at the back end of his career and still have some positive value to contribute to a team and, gave up nothing for it and was even gifted money to fulfill the rest of that contract. I mean, it's great for them, that they traded Eugenio Suarez and, now had a spot open at third. So makes a lot of sense to me.
In terms of outs above average, last year, Nolan Arenado was a 3. He was in the 81st percentile of outs above average across Major League Baseball.
Can't complain.
That's the worst season defensively he's had in the last 8 years. I mean, when we talk about a guy, what did he win? 10 straight Gold Gloves, I believe, or was a Gold Glove finalist 10 consecutive years, has won several platinum gloves as well. I'll find it for you, Ethan. Don't worry about it. It's not that big a deal. It was 10. I think he was a 10 straight. No, I'm sorry. He won 10 Gold Gloves. I don't know if it was 10 in a row. It was 2013, 2014, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, and 22. Yes, 10 consecutive Gold Gloves. A slew of platinum gloves, 6 platinum gloves for that matter, which is the best defender in all of baseball, not just at your position. 6 platinum gloves and 10-time Gold Glove winner. I mean, there is an argument to be made. I know some of the old heads would fight me on it about some of the guys that I didn't see play. There is an argument to be made that Nolan Arenado defensively is one of the best defensive third basemen in the history of baseball. And to get him at 34 years old, defensively, having an 81 percentile, 3 outs above average season, be his worst season ever, you've upgraded defensively at third base. Even if the chase rates are not as good as they used to be, the expected numbers are way down, the barrel rates are down, the hard hit rates are down. Offensively, he's not the guy that he once was. But at least you have one known quantity. I think in this individual instance, this is a pretty good trade for the Arizona Diamondbacks.
Yeah, I agree for where they're at and just needing and willing to take risks to see what works for them and being a smaller market team and not just having the money to shell out. I'm all for it.
Let's pause. One final segment on the other side. We're going to get into our Remember Me segment of the day. I'll tell you what the clue is or what the category is, and we'll wrap up this afternoon as we continue to await a Bo Bichette decision. It's the PHLY Phillies Podcast. We broadcast live from the Xfinity Lounge, and we'll be right back after this. Guys, let's be honest for a second. You get into your 30s, things start to get a little bit more difficult. Your workouts become harder. Your recovery time seems to take more time. So you start to do Google searches and figure out what's going on. Is it just because I'm getting older? And what keeps coming up? well, potentially low T. And doctors, they act like TRT. It's no big deal. Just $3,000 for the rest of your life to shut down your natural production of testosterone forever. So if you want to head into the new year, turn back the clocks and make things easier for your body the natural way, that's where our friends at Mars Men come into play. They give you the same benefits of optimized testosterone, the energy, the strength, the focus, without shutting your body down. It's real natural ingredients, and it's like hitting the reset button on your body and your hormone factory instead of shutting it down entirely. So for a limited time, if you're interested, our listeners right now get 50% off for life, plus free shipping and 3 free gifts at mengotomars.com. It's a perfect way to kick off the new year strong. Again, mengotomars.com for 50% off and 3 free gifts when you check out. Do you really want one of your starting pitchers pinch hitting in a big spot? Of course you don't. It's not worth the risk, the time, or the money. You want to keep your stars focused on what they do best. And the same can be said for your business. You don't want your top people buried in operations, the tedious, time-consuming, redundant activities that not only take their time away, but also wear them down. You want to make sure your impact players stay fresh and focused on what they do best. That's where our friends at Togo come in. They're an integrated part of your team that take the work off your starter's plate so they can focus on making your company and your business move forward. Every engagement starts with free process mapping and engineering, and there is not a dime billed to you until the real work begins. And with each Togo program, they include a dedicated staff, custom automation, and a US-based process engineer team who act as your quarterback while you stay in control. At Togo, they turn your playbook into performance. You call the shots, they execute your way, and they advise along the journey. Visit harnesstogo.com to scale smarter, work faster, and stay focused on winning. All right, one final segment here on the PHLY Phillies podcast before we wrap up for this Wednesday afternoon. It is time to get into our Remember Me segment of the day. And Ethan, I think a lot of us have been thinking about Bo Bichette, and does he end up playing with the Phillies? And so today's category for our Remember Me segment is, these are all guys that have spent time with both the Toronto Blue Jays and the Philadelphia Phillies over their career. Now, I will say all 3 of these guys that we have used have played in that decade stretch that we've kind of used as our sample size. How many games they've played for each team, that remains the question. So you may get a guy who played a ton of games for the Phillies, but very little for the Blue Jays, vice versa. There's a lot of big-time names, obviously.
Yeah.
Roy Halladay is the big one, but you could also go into guys like
Sir Anthony
Dominguez, right? Most recently. Jeff Hoffman makes that list. We're not going to go with those guys, but we do have 3 players for you as always. Let's get to our first Remember Me player of the day. This player is a 17-year Major League vet, played for 5 different teams. 8 times in his 17-year career, he had 30 or more starts in a single season, and in his lone year with the Phillies, he led the National League in losses, earned runs allowed, and walks issued.
Wow.
Wasn't a good year in Philly.
Yeah. What year was this?
That he was with the Phillies?
Yeah.
I don't know off the top of my head. I want to say it was maybe like a 2014, 2015, somewhere in that time frame.
Okay. This feels very gettable. I mean,
I think this one is a very well-known name.
Okay. When was the last year he played?
Oh, that year, by the way, he also led the National League in starts. So we sat through 34 bad starts. They weren't all bad, but 34 starts from this guy.
Rich says A.J. Burnett.
It is indeed A.J. Burnett. 17-year career spanning from 1999 through 2015. Probably best known as a member of the Marlins, but was a 2009 World Series winner with the Yankees, pitched for the Phillies in 2014, spent 1 season with Pittsburgh, actually bookended his time with the Phillies in Pittsburgh. And here's the thing. 2013 in Pittsburgh, 3.3 ERA. 2015 in Pittsburgh, 3.1 ERA, and was an all-star. 2014 with the Phillies, 4.6 ERA, lost 18 games, and gave up 109 earned runs on the season. That is number 1. Good get. Well done. Good start for the year to this game. Number 2, this is a 17-year vet who played with 9 different teams. Now, he has 2 kind of claims to fame here because he's kind of a journeyman type of player. He made the 26th out in Roy Halladay's no-hitter against the Reds in the postseason. Now, we all remember Brandon Phillips with the little dribbler. Chooch makes the great play. That's the final out of the game. But he made the out before that final play. And this guy, since his playing career has ended, has been a manager in the major leagues.
The only manager I can think of, and I think I've told you this before, is player manager is Stephen Vogt, and I don't believe
not Stephen Vogt in this instance. It is not.
Ray Schumacher says Skip Schumacher.
No, Skip Schumacher did not play for the Phillies.
Rich says Castro.
If I assume you're thinking about Miguel Castro, close but not quite. It is not David Bell. Okay. Good guess. Bell was on that Reds team and has managerial experience. Fits almost every part of that bill except this one.
Rich says Alex Castro.
It is not. No.
Okay. Oh.
This player played for the Blue Jays, Cubs, Devil Rays. Devil Rays gives you key to when he played. Cardinals, Yankees, Mets, Mariners, Phillies, and the Reds. Primarily a bench player for most of his career. A couple years he was a starter, but most of his career, especially towards the end, was a bench player.
I'm trying to just think of like recent managers. Gabe Kapler.
No. Now, I will say, maybe the reason I put managerial experience was because he was an interim and did not get the job back.
It's going to be even harder.
Now, I will say he was the interim manager of the team that he has that managerial experience with last season.
Ray Schumacher says, I'm totally going to butcher that last name. Miguel.
It is Miguel Cairo. Yes, Miguel Cairo was the interim manager of the Nationals this year after they fired Dave Martinez. Excuse me. He was the interim manager of the Nationals. They went 29-43, and now he is the team's infield coach of the Baltimore Orioles. So he did not get that job back. But well done. Yes, Miguel Cairo is the answer to number 2. Let's get to the final one of today's game. This is an 11-year vet who played for 8 teams. He was also a all-star with the Rays in 2017. He was acquired from the Pittsburgh Pirates in the 2019 trade deadline. And I will say about this guy is a better hitter than his career gives him credit for. I think this guy, when the Phillies acquired him, I was very much in on them bringing him back as a bench bat. They did not. He only ended up playing like 40 games for the Phillies when they acquired him. I would have brought this guy back in a heartbeat, but I do think he may have gotten a decent deal the following offseason. Yeah, he got a 2-year, like $18 million deal. The Phillies weren't going to give him almost $9 million to be a bench bat, but I really thought this guy was a pretty solid hitter.
Only 40 games. I'm kind of like slightly starting to focus on someone. So the third clue refers to that he was traded from the Phillies to Pittsburgh.
No, traded from Pittsburgh to the Phillies.
Okay.
For international bonus pool money and a player to be named later.
From Pittsburgh to the Phillies in 2019.
Nah, Dobbs a little bit before this one. Played for Colorado, the Rays, the Pirates, the Phillies, the Marlins, a small stint in Toronto, and then a year each with St. Louis and Washington before his career ended. But the year that he split with the Phillies and the Pirates, he hit .304. I thought this guy was a really solid hitter.
Oh, Corey Dickerson.
It is Corey Dickerson, yes.
Nice.
I think this guy was a much better player than his career gives him.
Yeah.
It is indeed Corey Dickerson. Well done, Broad Street Bullies. Well done, Rich. And well done, Ethan. Yes, Corey Dickerson is the final one. I would have brought this guy back as a bench piece the following year.
Yeah.
Don't mention that name in this chat, Frank Barber. We don't speak about Sean Rodriguez on this show. Sean Rodriguez was the guy that, if you remember, Ethan, he was the one that basically said, like, Phillies fans are entitled and they're losers. And
yes, I do. Yeah.
We don't speak about Sean Rodriguez on this show. That's blasphemy.
Yeah.
Of course I kid. Big thank you to everybody who was here today. That's going to pretty much wrap up today's show. We'll keep you in tune. As of right now, our next episode is going to be Friday at noon. But obviously, if anything happens over the next 48 hours, we will, of course, have a breaking news emergency podcast for you regarding the Bo Bichette decision, which we hope happens sometime in the next week or so. Until that time, big thank you to everybody in the chat. Really appreciate you all for being here today. Big thanks to everybody who's going to watch the show later, whether it be on YouTube or listening on our audio podcast platforms. And of course, as always, big thank you to Ethan Hartley for producing and co-hosting today's show. Stick around. Coming up next for the remainder of the day, it is, of course, the PHLY Eagles show at 2. The PHLY Sixers pregame show begins at 6:30 tonight, followed by the Flyers pregame show at 7. And then, of course, both of those teams will have postgame shows about 10 minutes after the conclusion of the game. Big two-sport night for Philadelphia here, especially here at PHLY. And we'll be back again on Friday at noon for the next installment of the PHLY Phillies podcast. We love y'all. We'll talk to you on Friday here on the PHLY Phillies podcast. See ya.
We all silly like the mayor.